You're going to learn how to defeat writer's block forever. It all starts with getting mentally focused. And not like Al Pacino shoving his face into a pile of cocaine, and we aren't going to be hopped up all on Red Bull to give you wings either. If you've got writer's block like The Rock throws the smackdown at a WWE event, then it's time for you to get my 4-step framework I call the Writer's Waterfall Method. Imagine yourself flowing with ideas and writing endlessly, with no blockers in the way. You're just free, like Happy Gilmore being free in his happy place. So, what is the Writer's Waterfall Method? Well, it goes into 5 parts really: clarity, ideation, creation, repurposing, and community. Before we get into the details, I do need to tell you a story of how I came up with this framework and why it works so well for me. So 2 years ago, I quit my corporate job to write. All I do is write now. I didn't know it at the time, but quitting my day job was the best thing I could have done for my future self. I didn't realize at the time that I was going to be writing so much, but I also didn't really understand the power of it either. Because after leaving my corporate gig of 15 plus years building software companies, I realized there was more to life. I started writing every day, I was journaling, I was finding space and time to be able to hear myself think. I started writing and posting on LinkedIn with a real strategy and plan. And once I did that, that's when everything changed for me. I realized that writing is the key to making money on the internet. I realized that I needed a plan and a strategy to make it actually work. And one of the things that I recognized is that writing will create YouTube scripts like this, sales pages to convert people into customers, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, Instagram content, all of it. It all starts with the written word. So do you just start writing words and they magically print money? No, that's ridiculous. But that's why I put together my Writer's Waterfall Method. So let's get into it, right? So this is a visual of what I think of as the Writer's Waterfall Method. It goes into clarity, ideation, creation, and repurposing and community. So I didn't really understand this until recently, but it's the most important thing that kills writer's block. It's not about sitting down and writing first. It's about finding clarity. It's about finding that headspace that's clear for you to be able to actually start writing written words. And here's how I go about finding clarity. So some people may call this meditation, but for me, it's more about clearing my mind before I go into a writing session. I don't need 60 minutes to go through a meditation exercise. It really only takes 1 minute, and you should be able to do this right before a writing session, right before you start your ideation session, and what we'll get into in a minute. And once you've been able to clear your mind, similar to how JJ McCarthy does this before every football game for Michigan. Well, he's graduating now, but so you get the point that you want to do this before a big event. And for me, writing is that big event, and you'll be able to get more into this ideation mode. So how does meditation actually work? Well, in this 1 minute method, I make a decision that I'm going to do it at the same time every day, which we'll get into that in a second about when to actually book out the time of when you're going through and writing. But I sit down, I close my eyes, and I focus on my breath. And I let my mind wander, and if I start thinking about something, then I come back to the breath. I know it might seem ridiculous, but it's incredibly powerful, and just do it for 1 minute. Do that for me. Don't do it right now, but do it after this video. And just think about sitting, closing your eyes, and then taking the deep breath in and out. And anytime your mind wanders to something else, then really think about coming back to the breath and just thinking about deep breaths in and out. It's wild how powerful it is to clear your mind to be able to go into this next phase of what you need to do, which is this ideation session. And you can't get here until you really focus on getting your mind clear. So for me, ideation comes from, like, if you're going to create content, first of all, you need to really be thinking about the things that you love, the things that you do. Who are you? Because this is going to be about writing from your perspective. And the idea of looking at recent events, things that are going on that you're paying attention to, or podcasts that you listen to, YouTube videos like this one that you might get ideas from, creators that you look up to that are in your niche, books that you've read or are reading today. I've even put together a newsletter, and I'll talk about that in a second, of where I'm breaking down thought-provoking books into 4-minute reads for people. And then if you've been on calls with customers, prospects, things that you have eaten or just anything that you do in your entire life is really just ideation session and people that you look up to. So for me, one of the things that's a ritual for me, and they say that you are like the 5 people you spend the most time with, and for me, some of that is podcasts. And with podcasts, this My First Million podcast that I listen to religiously, which is twice a week or depending on how many episodes they drop, I'm able to pull a few things out of that. And that is incredibly powerful for me to be able to leverage what is Sam Parr and Sean Puri talking about in the My First Million pod this week, and 2 weeks ago is about 37 Signals founder who they interviewed, and I pulled some things out about starting software companies that I could weave into what I'm doing around creation. Then there's Huberman Labs. This is a whole different angle, but the meditation piece I was telling you about, he has a whole episode just on cold immersion therapy, like full immersion therapy, and doing contrast therapy of saunas versus cold plunges. And I've gotten into that, and it's been really powerful for me with listening to Huberman talk about that and then weaving it into who I am and what I do, and then turning that around into, I've got an idea. I want to talk about cold plunges. So how am I going to tie cold plunges into actually creating an idea, which we'll get to. But my point is, in this ideation session of just thinking about different ideas of what you can talk about, it's really powerful to just take what you're doing and think about it. For me, LinkedIn is the platform I'm on religiously because it is just where my people are. It's where I spend time. There's creators there. I love YouTube, but being able to actually read written words from others because I'm looking at building my personal brand on LinkedIn along with YouTube and some other platforms. But my point is, that's my primary. And I go there and I have built relationships with people and comment and engage, and it just gets new ideas from the platform. And the same thing can be true for you, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the platform is. Then there is Tim Ferriss. So again, back to the 5 people. This is another person that I've listened to all sorts of things. And we're going to do an example from one of his podcasts that I weave together into content from me, but leveraging his voice in a way that makes it unique to me, right? So Tim Ferriss, and then reading books. Books are powerful, right? I just finished reading Ali Abdaal's Feel Good Productivity book, and the newsletter that I dropped last week, which this would be the beginning of April 2024, where I broke apart how I would apply what Ollie's talking about to my life, and in the newsletter of how you would apply this book to building a personal brand. So there's a lot of connective tissue between books and podcasts and the things that I do, and that's how I come up with ideas for content. And then waking up, this is the meditation, the 1 minute piece of focusing on your breath came from Sam Harris and his book. So think through your version of ideation and what that looks like for you. And then, of course, I have to put YouTube up here because I have YouTube channels that I also pull ideas from. So let's get into, once you've built out your idea framework and you've sat with it and you understand, like, I want to talk about this episode or this thing, and you're just jotting down ideas. That's what you should be doing, is in a notebook, handwriting, what are my ideas? You don't have to have any of it figured out other than just the idea of what you want to do. But that idea can turn into 25 different versions of ideas. So it's up to you though. But that's the point, is that you need to then think through, what is my idea that I can turn into 25 pieces of content. So here's how you're going to do that. One is just thinking about the hook. So for my creation process, I set up 3 hours every week. So on Sunday, I sit down and think about, where am I going to find 3 hours to write my LinkedIn content? And I'm just focusing on LinkedIn for now. But that LinkedIn content can then turn into shorts on YouTube, which they have, and then also turn some of that into longer form videos like this one because of feedback that I've gotten from short form stuff. But it all starts for me with setting aside 3 hours a week, 1 hour for writing hooks and 2 hours for writing the content. And then the call to action comes out of all of that. So what do I do with starting with the hook? The 4 A's method, pick a proven method, and then adding in a power word. So here's what I mean. So the 4 A's method is 4 different types of posts. Or potential posts based on an idea. So if I have an idea about full immersion cold therapy, then that's something that I could do around, here's how to, if I want to tie it to being more physically or mentally fit, right? Here's how to leverage cold immersion therapy for that. Or here are the numbers, citing some type of reference related to how good it is for you, or being aspirational of saying, yes, you can do this too. Yes, it's freezing, but here's how to get over the walls, the mental walls that Huberman talks about in that episode, which I'll put into the description in the comments for you to listen to if you want. But my point is that, like, aspirational of, yes, you can do it too. Yes, 38 degrees Fahrenheit is freezing, but it's okay. And then the anthropological piece of, here's why cold immersion therapy is such a good thing for you. So that's just one little tidbit. Imagine if you had spun in something that is completely unrelated to cold immersion therapy, like YouTube. So how I create a YouTube channel leveraging cold immersion therapy, and then you weave that in, and now all of a sudden you've got 4 or 5 more ideas that are layered in here. So let's look at an example, right? So here's one that I posted in the beginning of April on LinkedIn, which is here's how, right? So it's actionable. Here's how to become mentally unbreakable in 2024. I wouldn't be creating content if it weren't for this. Powered by Tim Ferriss and Hugh Jackman. So imagine the here's why, right? Like I could go in here and talk about here's why leveraging Hugh Jackman's learnings from this Tim Ferriss podcast. Here's why it's so impactful to your life. Or yes, you can do this too. We'll go into it, but there's 4 different pieces to what I learned from that episode where Hugh Jackman is talking to Tim Ferriss on the podcast. And I can create 4 different versions of this post, which I haven't done yet, but the plan is to do that because this one did pretty well. So then I take this and I spin it into anthropological or aspirational or analytical, and I could create 3 other posts based on this one idea. Then you add in proven approaches. Everything you see on here is like what I said before about here's how, but imagine if you break these proven approaches into those buckets of anthropological, aspirational, analytical, right? So for the numbers, you've got trends and stats and number of tools, number of ways, number of quotes, right? So you can use these, but it just helps you. And there's 10 here, and there's other things you could add in here. But imagine taking that one idea times 4 for those 4 different types with the A framework times 10. Now you have 40 different pieces of content based on that one idea. If you use the A's framework plus proven approaches, and then adding in power words. What you're looking at here is on the left is the category that they're in, right? So adding in a category of urgency, or adding a word in that is based on urgency, or adding a word that is value affirming or security. These are different categories of feelings and emotions that you get. And it goes from curiosity, trust, fear, anger, vanity, right? So if I had added, which I didn't and should have, but adding in a power word into my piece, that if I wanted to add trust, and if you go across the line there, it's approved, right? Here's how to build a trustworthy, mentally unbreakable 2024. Or, you could have magic as another one. Here's the magical framework that Tim Ferriss and Hugh Jackman talk about, right? There's different ways that you could weave it in, but my point is like having power words are going to create that additional value associated to getting people to stop the scroll, and it's used in headlines and hooks. Now, here's another piece of content that I'll get into. So just to summarize what we do with hooks, it's starting with what we talked about, going to this portion here, right? So for creating a hook, it's the 4 A's method, picking a proven method, and then adding in a power word. So by doing that with the hook, then you can move into the content creation portion. But you need to start with the hook, and I typically spend that first hour writing the hooks out and coming up with what are the types of content that I want to write, because that then feeds into what am I actually going to create. So when I move into the next piece of actually creating the content itself, then this is another example that did pretty well that I wanted to talk through, which is the hook is starting my personal brand was terrifying. And terrifying is a fear word, right? So this one has a power word in the hook. These 5 things made it delightful. Delightful is another power word. So incorporating that into the hook, and then I have a little story that I tell. So as I go through this could be for short form, or I could turn this into a full long form video on YouTube about the 5 things that made starting my personal brand terrifying, delightful. And I may do that. But the point with this is with my content creation process as I'm writing, I want to write down those 5 things. And I want to be able to have a story to tell that bridges between the two of the hook and getting into my list. And the way that I do that is through this story of telling and creating some more emotion around it, which is hear me when I tell you this. Starting a personal brand is hard, but it doesn't have to be. The biggest challenge for me was making the decision to turn on creator mode. I thought I'd be judged or laughed at. Here's what helped me launch my brand. So that bridge helps any reader or listener or anyone that sees the content gets a bridge between the hook, a little bit more emotion of a story, and then I get into it, which is the things that I did. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the idea here is to be able to give you a listicle where you can build lists of the pieces of content that you want to weave together. So for this one, it's block the time to create, where like I told you before, on Sunday, I block up 3 hours. So I talk about that and why it helps me with the clarity step. Then working on my health of being able to actually go back to the gym, which I've been doing at 4:45, 4 days a week now, which feels great. And then being able to figure out how to weave cold plunges into the off days so I don't mess up what I'm doing in the gym. Then there's 3, 4, 5. I'm not going to go through it, but then you want to create the call to action at the end where you're able to actually have the listener, the reader, do something. And so I summarize it just like you should with any good video or content, is summarize what you talked about, block the time to create, work on your health, find community, build core relationships, and then therapy is a good thing. So go to LinkedIn if you want to see the full post. But then the last one is asking people to reshare it with their network, follow me for more content. So the reason I show you all this is because it's really important that you think through blocking your time, finding the clarity, and then being able to create the hook, go into the content. And then the last two pieces are repurposing. Well, repurposing is one of the last pieces, where, as I've been talking about, this was a piece of LinkedIn content. I'm also going to turn it into a YouTube short that you could see on my channel. That is going to turn into an Instagram reel. I can also take the words that are on LinkedIn and turn that into an actual post on Instagram. It could become a thread on X. There's ways to automate that so you don't have to spend all your time repurposing it. But my point is that by being able to box your time and having endless ideas, you're also going to be able to then repurpose it onto different platforms. And I'm starting Instagram up really soon, but that's the point, is that it makes it easier once you have an idea and you splice it into however many you think is relevant and necessary for that idea. Then you're able to then go into other platforms and repurpose it. And the last thing is community. I touched on this a little bit. It's one of the most important things for you to do, is to be able to find your community of people on that platform that are either, it could be a platform or it could be writers. I'm in both. And I've talked about this before too, but I joined the Premium Ghostwriting Academy that Nicholas Cole and Dickie Bush put together. And there's a link in the description for you to go talk to their team. But that community has been the thing that has helped accelerate my entire writing career to a point of now where I have the path to making 20K a month pretty easily just from writing and ghostwriting for people, which if you watch the other video that I linked to here, you'll be able to see it and learn more about that. But for this purpose of unblocking you from writer's block, using this waterfall framework is by far the best thing that you can do. So in summary of what we've talked about, we have talked about finding clarity, writing hooks, creating the content, repurposing it, and finding your community. Those are the 5 pieces of what you need to do to be able to unblock yourself from writer's block that you have, and go out there, turn on creator mode, and click the link below to join my 5-day email course that I put together for you on how to get started today to activate creator mode, which will help you even more. So thanks friends for joining, and I'll see you in the next video.